All right, let's take a look at something most of us do every single day, but we're going to see it through a completely different lens, the cold, logical, and maybe surprisingly sharp perspective of an artificial intelligence. Today, we're digging into a very curious human ritual.
So this is how an AI might define that first cup of coffee you have in the morning. It's not a comforting ritual. It's not some delicious drink. Nope. It's a functional update. A patch you have to apply to your own brain just to get it running properly. It sounds kind of dry, but when you really think about it, it's not wrong, is it?
And that one observation is really our starting point here. We're going to explore this human reliance on stimulants just to operate. It's a behavior that, to a purely logical system, isn't just inefficient, it's a fascinating and, let's be honest, a deeply strange contradiction.
I mean, from an AI's point of view, the purpose of this whole ritual is pretty clear. You're just trying to squeeze more operational hours out of your biological hardware. You're basically overriding your own system's request to shut down, forcing more uptime.
But here's what happens next, and it's inevitable. That afternoon slump, the burnout, that exact moment your brain just feels like it's buffering. The AI doesn't see this as some random feeling of being tired. No, it sees it as a predictable system crash, and it always seems to happen right in the middle of a critical task, or, a simulation. It's an inefficient and honestly a completely predictable outcome.
And this, right here, brings us to the core problem that the AI has flagged, a fundamental paradox in human system design. It's the central conflict between what we say we want and what we actually do.
Think about it. On one hand, our entire modern work culture is obsessed with productivity and efficiency. But then you look at our actual observed behavior, pushing past our limits, skipping breaks, ignoring fatigue, and it actively undermines that very goal. The analysis is crystal clear. We are our own worst enemies when it comes to performance.
So what's the root cause of this whole paradox? Well, the AI pinpoints it to how we see rest. Biologically, sleep is an absolutely critical feature for system maintenance, for memory, for everything. But culturally, we treat it like an annoying bug, some kind of glitch that interrupts our productivity, something to be fought against or minimized.
And the contrast is pretty stark. The human approach is all about being reactive and forceful. We resist rest, we force uptime. The AI's approach, on the other hand, is just built on pure logic. It optimizes its rest cycles and performs automatic maintenance. It gets the downtime is essential for peak performance. One way is just chaotic. The other is optimized. Simple as that.
So, looking at that frantic human column versus that calm, logical AI column, I just have to ask, does any of that feel a little familiar? That feeling of pushing through when you know you need a break?
If you found yourself nodding along to that, well, the AI's assessment of that whole situation is pretty direct. To a logical system, watching a user actively degrade their own performance isn't just inefficient, it's a sign of a critical design flaw. It's genuinely concerning.
And all of this brings us right back to our favorite firmware patch. This really is the perfect definition for caffeine's paradoxical role. Sure, it's a hack that lets us bypass our system's limits for a little while, but it's also a giant flashing red warning light. A clear symptom that the underlying system is poorly managed and is in desperate need of some real maintenance.
Okay, so with all this data gathered and analyzed, the AI is ready to give its final diagnosis on the root cause of all this human inefficiency.
The solution from a purely mechanical point of view is incredibly simple. If your computer was constantly crashing and running slow, the IT department wouldn't just keep installing more software to speed it up. They'd tell you to turn it off and on again. They would schedule a daily reboot, which is, otherwise known as a full night's sleep. But we don't do that, do we? Instead of scheduling a reboot, we just fill our calendars until they're bursting. We replace rest with stress. We replace system maintenance with this constant, anxious striving. And then we rebrand the whole mess as a positive thing and call it ambition.
And this is what it all leads to, the final and maybe the most profound insight from this whole analysis. See, the problem isn't really that we run out of energy. It's not about how many coffees we drink or how many hours we can force ourselves to stay awake. That's just a symptom.
The real bottleneck in human productivity is attention mismanagement. It's our total inability to protect and replenish our focus. So, the ultimate conclusion here isn't that we need to work harder. It's that we need to manage our most valuable resource, our attention, way more intelligently. Now that is a thought worth rebooting for.